Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Rebel News live stream on this, a Thursday, December 2nd, 2021. I'm David Menzies, and my co-host. Let me tell you about my co-host. You know what? She's a farmer in the morning. She's a huntress by night. In between, she's doing journalism, and she does more journalism in 5 hours than the CBC does in 5 days. She is the she-devil with the sword. She is the Khaleesi of Northern Alberta. She is Sheila Gunn Reid. How you doing there, Sheila?
David, I'm great, but I just realized of all the weapons that I just have kicking around in this house, I don't have a sword. And so I think maybe I should get a sword. Put it on the Christmas list. I've been good this year, Santa. Give me a sword.
Yeah, now you know what Sheila Gunn Reid wants for Christmas. For me, it's one of two things. My dream Christmas gift, and forgive me for being indulgent, it's to get a replica Batmobile, the performance model from Fiberglass Freaks in Indiana. I know it's only $300,000 US, but second is what Sheila Gunn Reid is wearing today, that gorgeous Camp Crystal Lake sweatshirt. I am in love with that sweatshirt. It's almost as good as some of the stuff we have in our Rebel News store, Sheila.
Oh, David, that's a beauty of a segue into a store promo. You are a trained broadcast professional. Yeah, the kids got me this shirt, and I sort of had it, and I was going to wear it, and then I got it after Halloween. But you know, I like horror movies, so it's good anytime. But yeah, we should segue into the store. Yes. Because you can use our coupon codes. They've renewed them if you used them last year at rebelnewsstore.com. Order now because of supply chain issues unrelated to us. And if you have to rely on Canada Post, like much of Canada does, they work for the government. And no offense to the workers at Canada Post, but it's a little slow.
Sheila,
so anyways,
if I may make a segue here, there is another additional reason, not just volume, why things might be a little slow, and it's a tragedy, because I know, we have fun jesting with postal workers, but the fact is, a lot of them do a good job, a hard-working job.
I don't have a problem with them. I don't like their union, though. I don't like the postal union.
Neither do I, and as you may know, folks, many of them are in the process of losing their jobs right at the busiest time of the year because, well, they're the unclean, they're the typhoid Marys, they are the unvaxxed, and therefore that union, Sheila Gunn Reid just dumped on, justifiably so, they're not interested in going to bat with them. So kind of questions, I think, if I was a postie, why am I paying my union dues?
Exactly. At least through our work with fightvaccinepassports.com, I'm happy to be a little bit of a union buster and like show the world, you've been paying all this money to your union. They're doing nothing for you. Let Fight Vaccine Passports help you or at least push your union in the right direction in the interest of workers' rights. But getting back to the store, because I could complain about the post office all day, literally all day. But let's get back to our store at rebelnewsstore.com. Thanks, AD, for bringing that up. We've got some great new Christmas stuff there. But it doesn't look too Christmassy. It just looks like winter Rebel stuff, which is fun. So you can wear it a little earlier and a little later. We've got the phone cases, the coffee mugs. I always have my Rebel coffee mug on the desk here. And if you want to get 10% off your purchase and help me win the company-wide competition, you can use the coupon code Sheila10 to buy your shirts there or any other merchandise for that matter. And you can trust me because, as you know, I'm a t-shirt aficionado. But if you've already used your Sheila10 coupon code, you can always use David, Menzies10 coupon code, and get yourself the Menzies t-shirt with your Menzies10 coupon code.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And Sheila, if merchandise isn't a thing for our viewers in terms of the gift that keeps on giving, why not buy tickets to the next the Democracy Fund event, which is coming up this Monday? And wow, it's going to be a showstopper, a curtain dropper. Look at all these pastors, Pastor Pawlowski, Pastor Henry Hildebrandt, Pastor Phil Hutchings, all of them that have been so oppressed by the state. There's Dr. Julie Ponesse. She always knocks it out of the ballpark. What a delight she is. Oh, and look at that, our very own Sheila Gunn Reid in the background. I mean, that is a 5-coupon ride, and what a wonderful pre-Christmas gift that would be to buy a couple of those tickets for your loved ones. Don't you think so, Sheila?
Definitely, and the tickets are really affordable. It's $5 if that's in person. If you're in Whitby, Ontario, $5. Like if you're in Whitby, you need to get out of the house. You've been locked up by the state for a year. You've been listening to stories of pastors being arrested. These are the pastors who were arrested. Pastor Art, everybody knows Pastor Art. He's the Polish Lion of Calgary. He was locked up for 3 days, and then he was given a compelled speech order. Pastor Hildebrandt, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, and then the province of Ontario seized his church from him. And then Phil Hutchins, he's the latest pastor who was arrested and held for in excess of a week. And part of his crimes included not encouraging his congregation to receive the vaccine. But more importantly, he didn't force them to stop singing. And
incredible.
For that, 7 days in jail for him. And the worst part was because of travel restrictions into the Atlantic bubble or whatever they're calling it these days, it was almost impossible to report on the case or to find a lawyer. Democracy Fund was doing their best to help Phil from a distance because you couldn't get someone on the ground to help. So I'll be co-hosting that discussion with Dr. Julie Ponesse. And I got to tell you, David, I do a lot of things at the company, and not a lot of things scare me. But I am nervous to meet Dr. Julie Ponesse and to share a stage with her, however virtually. Yeah, Dr. Julie is this nice, elegant, well-dressed, well-spoken, highly educated lady. And then there's me. And I feel like I'm just like the lady with the baler twine holding up my pants. And what did I do this week? Oh, I invented a new swear word when I got my Jeep stuck in a snowbank when I was like Omicron variant worth of hungover on Saturday morning. Like that's what I did. And I don't know why I get to share a stage with this really smart, great lady. But I'm so glad that she's working with the Democracy Fund. She's just wonderful. She's such a big thinker. And I just have a passion for religious freedom, so maybe that's why I'll be there.
You don't have to. You two are kindred spirits, Sheila. Let me tell you. And you know what I love about Dr. Ponesse is she has this charming delivery style where she gives this little giggle, and it's so wonderful because what she's giggling at is the absurdity of it all, especially when it comes to, well, I better not say, it might not be YouTube friendly, so I better not say it. But it's so endearing, her delivery. And I've seen her speak 3 times. I've interviewed her once. She always gets a standing ovation. There was a great heft of intellect there. Kind of funny, isn't it, Sheila? An ethics professor. And when I bumped into her last month in London for my interview with her, if she were to go back to her old alma mater where she was teaching Western University, she would actually be arrested for trespassing. Can you believe it? But you know what? I got to tell you, $5. I mean, that's not a Christmas gift. That's a Boxing Day gift. You can't get a movie ticket for $5, Sheila. Even on Half Price Tuesday, you can't even get a buttered popcorn for $5. And make sure it is butter, folks. Some of these movie chains, they use something called golden topping, and it ain't butter. And the other thing, if you can't make it out in person to Durham region, where the Canada Christian College is located, you can sign up virtually and watch it from the comfort of your home. And the last 3 were great. Well, especially the first 2. People who attended the last one will know what I'm talking about there. But listen, for $5, how can you lose? Sheila, I think we're going to pack the joint. I think there are so many people impassioned by what these pastors have gone through that they're going to come out as a sign of solidarity if the tickets were, $55, let alone $5. So as Billy Red Lions used to say on Maple Leaf Wrestling, don't you dare miss it.
Yeah, AD tells us we should get into the news of the day, but yes, go to the democracyfund.ca, get your tickets. You can attend in person for $5 as a steal of the deal, but you can also attend virtually, and you're going to hear the stories of religious persecution and how these men stood up to it and held to their conscience during these crazy times of COVID. Before we move on to the stories of the day, we should tell everybody what we're doing here. This is the Rebel News Daily live stream. It used to just be on Friday, just hosted by Ezra Levant. But the pandemic struck, everybody was sort of sent home and we couldn't travel, and the news was changing as the days went. The restrictions were coming and going, and variants were coming and whatever. So anyway, we thought, what a good way to sit down and talk to our people, share the news of the day, and give them a chance to support us, which they used to be able to do on YouTube before YouTube dropped the mask, went full censorship mode, and demonetized us completely, so we couldn't accept super chats from our friends and supporters. However, there are 1.6-ish million of you who watch us on YouTube at any given time, and we don't want to abandon you, and YouTube really doesn't want us to remain there, so I do a lot of things for spite, so we stay there. But there will come a time during the show that we need to leave the censorship platform of YouTube, because there are so many things that we can't talk about, and we can't even tell you the things we can't talk about because that'll get the channel killed. So we are at the same time simultaneously broadcasting on Rumble, Super U, and Odyssey. All of those three platforms are free speechy platforms, free thinking platforms. They really don't care about your politics. Rumble even says it's completely neutral, which is perfect. I don't want a left or right platform. Just leave me alone. But they also, all of them give you a chance to support our work through donations and tips, Rumble Rants, Odyssey, Hyper Chats, and Super U Shouts. So there will come a time where we have to say, okay, bye-bye YouTube, not YouTube viewers. YouTube viewers follow us over here. So that's it. David, let's get into the news of the day.
And there's some great ones. Before we do, very quick question, Sheila. What is your preference? Fresh from the farm, Canadian-made butter on your popcorn, or golden topping?
Well, golden topping is also fresh from the farm because it's usually canola. I'm a canola farmer, full disclosure.
Oh. See, I don't know what it is even.
Yeah, it's canola. It's butter-flavored canola. And you guys in Ontario have weird rules about margarine. Like, are you allowed to color it yellow, or are the butter people still mad about that?
Oh, you know what? I knew that used to be a rule, and we also sell milk in bags. But anyways, we somebody in the control room is doing
probably
this, which
sweating
means I'm
right
crazy,
now.
or that we have to get to the first item. Well, you know what,
both.
Sheila? 98%, I would say, of the stuff you buy in a Dollarama is made in China. Turns out that election interference in Canada is also made in China. What is this all about?
Yeah, so this is interesting because if we were to talk about like election meddling, we couldn't talk about certain aspects of that in relation to other things, and I'm even dancing around what I'm allowed to say here. But we can talk about China election meddling. We just can't talk about like other sort of election problems. But yeah, evidence abounds. This is Terry Glavin. Evidence abounds of China's interference in Canada's elections. Thanks, tips. I think we've all been saying this for a long time, but it's interesting to see it actually written in the mainstream media. It's been more than 2 months since the September 20th federal election, and the verdict is in. Not the verdict that put Justin Trudeau's Liberals back in power with fewer votes than Erin O'Toole's Conservatives, but the expert consensus that a disinformation operation hatched in Beijing was in operation during the campaign, and its target was primarily Chinese Canadians. Just as it may never be known whether the complex Kremlin-orchestrated disinformation and propaganda operation codenamed Project Latka played a decisive part in turning American voters against Hillary Clinton and handing Trump his narrow electoral college majority in 2016. basically they say we'll never know the extent to which this Chinese disinformation campaign played a role in bringing Justin Trudeau back to power. But I'm not sure if old Glavin here is up to speed on what actually went down in that 2016 election, but I'm pretty sure it had a lot to do with how unpalatable that insufferable old crone Hillary Clinton is. I still dislike her as much in 2021 and almost 2022 as I did in 2015 and 2016. I still have that visceral dislike for her horrible personality and her evil behavior and her whole evil family, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, and also even though the left keeps bringing it up, Russian collusion, that's been debunked. It's the biggest lie of all time.
So many times, so many times.
Yeah, and if you keep saying it, it's not going to make it true, you pinkos. But here's the thing, Sheila, I feel sorry for the Beijing regime. If they were employing resources to tamper with the Canadian election to get the Justin Trudeau Liberals elected, wow, never has so much been spent for so little, because they didn't have to do anything. They had their very own homegrown secret weapon. Aaron O'Toole as the leader of the opposition. To me, this is like, one of the reasons why OJ was found not guilty of double homicide in yesterdecade was that the LAPD actually framed a guilty man. In other words, the LAPD didn't have to plant evidence. They just had to let the evidence they found speak for itself, much like the Chinese. They didn't have to tinker with anything. When Aaron O'Toole became the Me Too opposition leader, so Justin Trudeau says, carbon taxes, Aaron O'Toole, Me Too. Justin Trudeau says, gun ban, Aaron O'Toole, Me Too. Justin Trudeau says, censorship. Well, this is where Aaron O'Toole says we're pro-free speech but anti-cancel culture, but he's actually the opposite. So he kind of went, well, me, sort of. So what I'm saying, Sheila, is that Canadians, especially conservatives, especially Western Canadians, who felt, I think, taken advantage of by Aaron O'Toole, the Chinese just didn't have to do anything if these allegations are true. And when you look at the results... Well, they did a little something,
it sounds like. It did a little something, it sounds like, in one of the ridings, particularly in Metro Vancouver, where it's sort of divided between pro-Beijing actors and pro-freedom Chinese community, the Chinese expat community who came here to escape Beijing, but are still apparently in their ridings being controlled by the tentacles of Beijing. It says here the primary target of the operation in Canada was the Conservative Party, naturally, notably the popular Metro Vancouver MP Kenny Chiu, who ended up losing the riding of Stevenston, Richmond East, to the Liberal candidate by 3,000 votes. Yeah, it is something that at least cost a high-profile, very popular Chinese-Canadian conservative his seat because he wasn't pro-Beijing enough. Now, I'm not necessarily sure exactly how much Beijing had to get involved in all of this, since every time you open your mouth about how bad the Chinese government is and how they lie about everything, pandemic, you have the mainstream media telling you to shut up and you're racist, and you have the World Health Organization telling you to shut up and quit being racist, when you're like, actually, I'm pretty sure Chinese people are the first victims of Beijing, and so we don't want it to come here, especially to affect the Chinese diaspora who come here for freedom. But the second you ever say Beijing lies, you're a racist, because they take great pleasure in conflating the Chinese government with the Chinese people, and any thinking person knows the difference.
And Sheila, it's funny. I never come across the pro-Beijing Chinese Canadians. I'm not saying they're not out there, but I hearken back to, it must be 5 years now, 2016, I'm thinking, when Efren and I went to Queen's Park. There was a huge, predominantly Asian protest. Remember the hijab hoax, where a Muslim girl had claimed that a Chinese man had ripped her hijab by scissors? Turned out to be completely fake, folks. and a few thousand Chinese Canadians came there. And I'll never forget, wow, talk about a Christmas present for Ezra, when they broke in unilaterally to a chant of Rebel Media, Real News, CBC, fake news.
I remember that.
That you know, I don't know if we can source that clip on short notice, but wow,
I got a
as they
picture
marched
with the
down.
guy.
Pardon me?
I got a picture with that guy at a Rebel event.
Oh,
who
yes.
started the chant. Yeah, I was like, he's like, oh, can I get a picture with you? I'm like, no. Can I get a picture with you?
Yeah, and you know what, Sheila? The funniest thing that day, there was a CBC News van that was going down University, hit the brakes when they saw these protesters. Oh, no, said, oh, look at this, all these Asians protesting something. Then they read the sign that they were protesting about the hijab hoax. And man, did that minivan resemble a Formula One race car?
Oh,
CBC wanted nothing of this. No. So again, Sheila, if these allegations are true, do you think that the Chinese were, that's the Chinese Communist Party, of course. Do you think that this was a good spend for them? Because I think if there was zero interference from them, the same results would have happened. And when you look at what Erin O'Toole and the Conservatives delivered, they failed on every tangible benchmark this election in terms of sheer number of votes, which was less than what Andrew Scheer got, number of ridings that he was supposed to win in the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, including my riding, by the way, where Leona Turncoat Alislav lost her riding. So, like I said, by every tangible benchmark, Erin O'Toole was an absolute failure. And maybe when we have another election within 2 years, perhaps the Chinese aren't going to, bother with this one if Erin O'Toole, that is still the leader. And I know what a horrific thought that is. Talk about the nightmare before Christmas.
I don't think this was about helping Justin Trudeau so much as it was about teaching Conservatives who speak out against China a lesson. I don't think Justin Trudeau needed the help since Erin O'Toole was helping him all he could. If I were a more conspiracy-minded woman, I would suggest that Erin O'Toole was a Liberal operative. But he's not. He's just not good at what he's supposed to do. But, I mean, I think this was about teaching anti-Beijing candidates that if you speak out, we will dump into your riding whatever it takes to make sure you lose. And that's what happened to Kenny Chiu.
Wow. Well, we will see if this happens again in the space of 18 to 24 months, which is the typical shelf life of a minority Canadian parliament, folks. By the way, sorry, David,
before we go on, and I know, AD, you want us to, but I have seen the pro-Beijing protesters firsthand. They protested Ezra's book signing for China virus.
In Alberta. Yeah, that's right.
They yelled at me, called me racist, and I was like, we're holding this at a restaurant that employs like almost all Chinese people, but okay, I guess I'm the racist. Anyway, they showed up.
That's what they call in the business astroturfing. They're pretending to be grassroots Chinese Canadians that are against this supposedly racist or anti-Chinese book, when in fact they're paid agents. They're phonies, much like AstroTurf is phony grass. That's what they are. And that was embarrassing because they didn't move the pendulum. I mean, if anything, they gave you more publicity to sell your books, right?
Oh, it was fun. It was fun. I was like, I hope the Chinese consulate shows up to protest us, and they did.
All right. Well, let's move on. Speaking of Alberta, oh my goodness, UCP calls out Rachel Notley for use of bad words. Sheila.
Okay, little bit of setup. Remember a couple days ago, CBC said that there's this whole list of words that we can't use.
Yes.
Well, Rachel Notley then hops on, adopting every bad idea and pro-censorship thing she sees. And she's like, this is an important read or something like that. And so while normally I'm highly critical of the UCP, they actually were like, oh, let's just point out all the times that Rachel Notley said all these things that she now says that we can't say. Normal Canadian citizens, normal Albertans, if we say these things, we're racist. But here you are, Rachel, saying these things. So kudos to UCP MLA Dan Williams for putting together this video.
In a move that would make Kim Jong-un and the late communist Fidel Castro blush, Rachel Notley recently highlighted a list of common words and phrases, curated by the CBC of course, that she wants banned from public discourse. The list includes words like crippled, as in the NDP Alberta's economy with the largest tax hike in provincial history. Phrases like blindsided, as in Rachel Notley and the NDP Albertans when they made backroom deals with the Liberals and Justin Trudeau to cancel our pipelines. And savage, as in the Minister of Energy, Sonia Savage, is doing an amazing job defending our oil and gas industry and cleaning up the NDP's mess. Never mind the fact that Rachel Notley herself has already been outed for regularly using these exact words and phrases. This is a hard turn to the left by the socialist members of the NDP, and it tells us a lot about the state of our province and their politics. With the mid-year fiscal update showing that Alberta's recovery plan is working and that jobs and investment are quickly coming back to our province, the NDP is going back to their trusted well of lame identity political tricks to get Albertans riled up. Fortunately, you and I know it's not going to work. With tens of thousands of Albertans getting back to work and Alberta leading our country in economic growth, it's tone deaf to think that Albertans would rather word police each other than celebrate our province's terrific economic comeback. With revenues up an eye-popping $14.2 billion and our deficit down a stunning $12.4 billion, we've also reduced the debt by $9 billion, while all managing a global pandemic, an oil crash price drop, and creating over 100,000 jobs in the past year. With jobs and investment flooding back into our province after 4 lost years under the members opposite, the NDP leader should brainstorm some new strategies because Albertans are focusing on getting back to work, not Soviet-style word censorship. This is a first world problem from the opposition if there ever was one, but it shows that our province is on the right track.
Brilliant.
You know, that was pretty good.
You know, Sheila, if that Notley nattering nabob of negativity gets back in power as your premier, oh goodness gracious, my heart goes out to you.
Well, you know what? Good news is the economy is turning back around. Drilling is up, I think, tenfold over last year. So that's great for the UCP. But they need to get rid of their vaccine passport to reset the relationship they currently have with their own voters. But this is a good first step. This is, you know, in defense of free speech. It's cheeky. And frankly, I'll listen to whatever Dan Williams' mustache is trying to tell me. I would. I don't know where that mustache came from. Usually he's pretty clean shaven. I'm like, he's got a curling broom on his lip. I'm intrigued.
You know, and the absurdity, by the way, I don't know if you know this, Sheila, that CBC story actually got picked up by Fox News. Yeah, because sometimes you have to turn to, if it's not Rebel, you got to go to Fox to learn what's happening in Canada. And, you know, this word political correctness that's been going on for decades now. And one of the examples I always point to, and it was referred to in that video, it's under the ban list, was crippled. Used to be if you had lost the use of your legs, you'd be called, you know, a crippled person. Crippled went to handicapped. Handicapped went to disabled. Now I believe it's people with ability issues. But in the 70s, the politically correct mavens, Sheila, they tried a new word for disabled people. It was a combination of handicapped and disabled, and the word was, and I'm not kidding you, handy-abled. And to me, Sheila, if I hear that you're handy-abled, I think that's the opposite of being disabled. I think that means that's a guy that can go into Home Depot, buy a ton of wood, build a tree house by himself. And, you know, handy-abled, it's like handyman, right? Like, these people are crazy.
I don't know. Yeah, the handy-abled sounds exactly the opposite of you. But you can't get construction supplies home in that awful little car you drive. How
dare you? I'm trying to save the planet.
Are you?
Yeah.
Are you? We should move along. We should move along because I know AD likes to run a tight ship.
Okay.
Former Mr. Producer Justin used to just let us do our thing, but it's probably for the best that we have somebody who's exercising some control over the things we talk about. And for how long? We've got our next story is Ontario Union considers giving Black employees 2 extra days off. I immediately read this and I think, oh, this is actually the bigotry of low expectations rearing its ugly head. Because to tell me that Black employees can't cope with putting in a full work week means that you think they are differently abled than the other employees in the job site, right? Like that they can't get through the work week. They need some management help. That seems like you don't think that they're good workers, which if you're judging people like that based on race, I think that might be the textbook definition of racism, right?
Yeah, let's not beat around the bush here, Sheila. This is the R word, racism, and not as some people sometimes mistakenly do, oh, this is reverse racism. No, it's racism is racism. And if you're going to say that people who are Black get 2 extra days off, what I wonder about is what about other minority groups? What about Asians? What about brown-skinned people? What about the handicapped people? And the list goes on. And for that matter, what about sexual orientation? Would gay people or trans people also qualify for the extra 2 days off? And, you know, I would see a Black person being really offended by this. You know what it reminds me of, Sheila? I'm going to throw to you to give this story because I can't remember all the details, but I know you can. Wasn't there going to be, under the Rachel Notley government, some special provision for the Hutterites in terms of, I can't even remember the policy. Tell us that story. And the Hutterites, they didn't grab at it. They were outraged that the Rachel Notley NDP would try to create divisions between themselves and people who are not of the Hutterite community.
Sure, yeah, this was during Bill 6. So Bill 6 was the Rachel Notley urban intellectual idea for our Alberta family farms. They decided that basically they were going to put bankers' hours on family farms. It was a pro-unionization law where you couldn't like have child labor. And I'm like, well, then I have no labor at all. Like my kids drive the tractors. And so they were going to put child labor laws into force in the farm and like hours of work, hours of rest, all that kind of stuff. And the Hutterites said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Not only are we major large-scale farming operations, but we're all family. And so Rachel Notley said, okay, then in this big, huge farm law, we're just going to exempt you based on your religion. And I guess based on, I don't know how you would do that, but basically if you were a Hutterite colony, this didn't apply to you. And the Hutterites instead said, forget it. It's all or nothing. You will not divide us from our friends and neighbors after a century of building a community and overcoming, divisions. We're all in this together. Just because our neighbors don't live like us doesn't mean that they're any less farmers, and you're not going to do this. And they rejected it. And we're seeing the opposite play out in this story because it's the Black Caucus of the Association of Management, Administrative and Professional Crown Employees of Ontario. The paper pushers of Ontario have their own Black Caucus. That's interesting. Indicates the motion follows an apology by Ontario government deputy ministers earlier this year for the continued prevalence of anti-Black racism in the workplace. So that's the Conservative government apologizing for that. The union represents 14,000 professionals, technical support workers, analysts, consultants, and managers in the Ontario Public Service, as well as Ontario agencies such as the Ontario Arts Council, Public Health Ontario, again. Their annual conference is slated for Thursday and Friday, so today and tomorrow. They already have 3 days of compassionate leave. The source went on to say that the Black Caucus wants 2 additional days just for them based on race, pointing to a third-party review of OPS that found systemic racism and discrimination against employees who are Indigenous, Black, racialized, and LGBTQ, as well as those who have disabilities. So they got an apology, but now they want 2 extra days.
Sheila, here's the thing, and I mean this, if Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, he would find this kind of a policy odious. this goes against equality. This is also a reason why I'm against programs like affirmative action, employment equity, because when
gender quotas,
because whoever gets the job should be based on one thing: merit. That is colorblind. And I'll tell you something. If you have an organization that's committed to affirmative action and employment equity, say a person of color does get that job, you know what the whisper campaign is? Oh, look at Jim. You know why he got that job? It's because he's black, or it's because he's brown, Asian, and he might have been the best candidate based on merit, but this unfair judgment results.
It taints their achievements. Exactly. This is crazy, because I'd love to see their data to support this. It says,
oh, have we got you frozen? Well, as we struggle to get oh, there you are, Sheila.
Oh, did I freeze up? Sorry,
you froze up just when you're about to recite the data, so fire away, my friend.
Oh, actually, there's no data, but I want to see the data. The resolution states that there has been an overwhelming increase in mental health challenges among Black members of the union. So we're surveying people based on their race and their mental health challenges. That seems like racism. But also notes that the stress of racism manifests itself in poor health outcomes, health inequities, and disproportionate representation of debilitating diseases for Black people. Just the amount of victimhood written into this. It's like, are you telling me that Black people can't make good lifestyle choices?
By the way, while you were scrolling down, Sheila, I saw some racism in the reporting. They referred to Black people lowercase b as opposed to uppercase b.
Racism.
By the way, that doesn't apply to white people. It's always lowercase w. There you go. Oh boy, somebody needs sensitivity training. They didn't get that memo. And the other thing, Sheila, what gets me is, again, on the employment equity side, and you see this, you used to always see it with government jobs. Now it's corporate jobs as well. And there's a job posting, the qualifications needed, and then the de rigueur. This position is open to all candidates, but a special consideration will be given to, and it's you check off all the identity politic boxes, which basically translates into, if you are a white, straight, able-bodied Christian male, you're screwed, and they pretend. Yeah, they pretend that, it's still open to everybody. It'd be like me, Sheila, sending you an invitation to a party I was having. And, Sheila, this invitation is open to the Gunn Reid family. I really, really, really especially want you to come, right? Not so much your husband.
That's why we get invited anywhere. Exactly. I'm the reason we get invited anywhere. So it's fine.
Who's kidding who? And that, to me, is racist. It's racist, it's sexist, there's a whole other bunch of descriptors in there. But it's amazing. The left used to be on the forefront of civil rights movements when it came about protesting Jim Crow laws, when it came about protesting apartheid, as well it should. And now they are embracing racism. They are embracing segregation. I don't think they even know what they stand for anymore.
No. And, the whole point of equal rights was that one person was just as capable as another in certain areas. And now it's like, no, they're less capable. So now we need these programs to unfairly advantage them in the workplace and then taint all their other achievements with this fake program to help lift them up when they don't need it. They don't need it. Anyways, AD whispered that we have to hurry along because it's 10:38 my time. We should get to Canada Land.
Is that an amusement park?
You know what? We talked about this in the prep meeting for the live stream, which you were not on because you were actually doing other work, so it was fine. I was glad. But Canada Land got their hands on a copy of the $10 million journalism top-up from Justin Trudeau, the federal funding for media organizations. And initially I said, I can't stand those guys. But at the same time, this is a good story and it doesn't matter who it comes from. And I just wish that other people would treat us the same way. Instead of stealing my stories and saying, look at this exclusive. And I'm like, well, that's not exactly an exclusive since I published it 2 days earlier and maybe you could credit me for it, Globe and Mail. But, but you know what? Fair is fair. Canada Land did get this. This is the $10 million additional, beyond everything else, top up to, I think it's magazines, publishers that way. Startling Maclean's is right there at the top next to the Western Seducer. If you can get your, if you can go to the bottom of this AD and it has the list, there's a PDF that shows who actually got this $10 million top up. And Maclean's, the absolutely unreadable Maclean's, is number 2 at 166,000. The Western Producer, Canada's agricultural magazine of note. Farmers call it the Western Seducer because they're trying to seduce you into being an advocate for carbon taxes and every left-wing thing that ever happened on the prairies. Naturally, you can see in their reporting, their pro-carbon tax reporting, that they are getting a fair share of money from Justin Trudeau. The Legion magazine got $127,000. I thought they published that. I got that because of my Legion membership, but apparently they're also taking money from Justin Trudeau. More people would join the Legion if they didn't have the Vax passport, by the way. Yeah. The Zoomer, Hockey News, Canadian Geographic, Chatelaine, the Liberal Women's Magazine, Toronto Life, the Liberal Torontonians Magazine, the Catholic Register, that annoys me, Chickadee, Chirp, Outdoor Canada, the Anglican Journal, so our Christian friends are equal opportunity consumers of Justin Trudeau's grants. The Walrus, you know what? I'm shocked to find out they're still around, and they got $60,000 almost from Justin Trudeau. Exploring China, and if I recall correctly, AD, I think it's at the bottom there. If you scroll down, various Ming Pao newspaper affiliates, getting back to the whole China story. Various no, go back to the Canada Land article, please. Thank you. So underneath the Black's Press there, various Ming Pao newspaper affiliates took funding from multiple government funds. The largest individual recipient of the top-up fund from Ming Pao was Saturday Magazine, the Toronto edition, taking $54,204. The same publication claimed $107,195 from the Emergency Relief Fund, which I think the emergency wage top-up Canada Land itself took. Sorry, can we just go back to that, because the next paragraph is kind of important because it goes to what we were talking about right off the top. A report from the Center for International Media Assistance in 2013 described Ming Pao as a Beijing-friendly publication pandering to Chinese Communist Party sensibilities. So the Canadian government is funding Chinese pro-Beijing propaganda in Canada, courtesy of the media bailout. Isn't that something?
And you know what I found perversely amusing? There was a sentence there. Jennifer Hollett, the executive director of the Walrus, declined to comment about how the funding formula was used. Sheila, you know, it's very funny how the mainstream media will go out of their way to insert themselves into anyone's lives and demand comment. The worst example, of course, being when the late, great Rob Ford was still alive, when they set up Live Eyes outside his house and just harassed that poor man 24/7. And yet, when some impolite questions come their way, oh, none of this, the public has a right to know, Sheila. It's, we're declining comment, no comment, be gone. Unbelievable.
Well, yeah, if you take public money, you have an obligation now to answer to the public about what you did with that money. Yep. And the last time I heard that Walrus was even doing anything was when they were sending reporters to spy on our cruise that I wasn't on. But do you remember that? They sent a reporter to go on a Rebel cruise to spy on the very nice people who spent their hard-earned money to sit around with some like-minded people and enjoy some R&R. And the worst they could come up with was, these people seem really nice, but they're conservative. You know, like they didn't really have much of a bad thing to say about people, but a bunch of weirdos, peeping toms.
Yeah, you know what? What were they expecting to find, Sheila? That's my question.
Well, that's the thing. They think that conservatives are just awful and racist when they think nobody's watching, and they never found that. They went with their preconceived notions, and they couldn't even fake that they found those things. But you know what? That brings me to the next thing, because you know who isn't taking government money? Us.
Yes.
And instead of shrinking like the mainstream media, we're hiring. So you can go to careers@rebelnews.com. If you want to apply. But we are always hiring. We're hiring for a director of development. This is rebelnews.com/careers, director of development. Always hiring for video editors because our journalists are producing so much content and there's so much news, despite what the mainstream media will tell you, that we have a whole host of positions that we're currently trying to fill. And I'm really proud of that, because as everybody else is shrinking, we're growing.
It is incredible. And by the way, folks, Sheila's not exaggerating when she talks about the mainstream media shrinking. Let's pick out the example of Maclean's magazine. I can tell you Maclean's began life as a monthly. Then it went to bi-weekly, which was twice a month. Then it went to a full news magazine weekly frequency, 52 issues a year, in other words. Do you know what it's down to now? 12 issues a year. And on top of that, what you want to do when you look at any periodical, look at who the advertisers are and how much advertising. I can tell you, coming from a print background, you want a balance of 60% ads, 40% editorial content. I am telling you, the typical Maclean's magazine is about 95% editorial, 5% ads, and of those ads, you'll see ads for the Blue Jays, you'll see ads for the Rogers store. Well, guess what? Those are known as house ads. Those aren't bought and paid for. Rogers is the home corporation. So basically, these are freebies. They're advertising other. So basically, no one is subscribing to it, certainly not on a weekly basis, as a monthly basis. No one's advertising in it. So why can't we just let it fail? Why can't we take this old, poor horse out to the back of the barn, shoot it, sell it for glue, and be done with it? Because we're propping up something, Sheila, that doesn't merit this kind of life support, because there is no support for this magazine.
When was the last time you saw Maclean's magazine in the wild? Like, not at the grocery store, at the checkout, but like in the wild, that somebody had a subscription or like opened up their wallet and exchanged money for a Maclean's. Like, there's one at my dentist's office. I go to the dentist every 6 months, right? Yeah. It's the same one for the last 3 years there. The same one. And nobody touches it. You would think a 3-year-old magazine, if people were picking it up, would be like falling apart, but it is pristine. It's like museum quality because nobody touches it.
Oh, Sheila, it's worse than you think. The last time I went to my dentist, all the magazines were totally eradicated from the built-in shelves.
COVID.
And you know why? COVID. Yeah.
COVID.
I'm
Okay,
gonna get COVID cooties from reading Maclean's. Well, maybe they're right on that, actually.
You know, if COVID kills Maclean's, I'll be fine. There's a fatality that I'm for. Yeah, we are actually, this is great. We are, speaking of all the things that we're talking about China today, we're hiring a China affairs reporter because we want to tell the other side of the story. And as you can see, the mainstream media is polluted by pro-Beijing propaganda that you paid for at this point through the media bailout. So we are hiring someone who can tell the other side of the story and provide some balance to that. Now, speaking of COVID, yeah. Oh, AD, are you a skilled video editor with strong researching abilities? Come work with Mr. Producer AD. Everybody, apply. Just apply.
Yep.
Can you do stuff?
And we're colorblind.
Apply.
We hire based on merit. I can safely assure you that. We don't care who or what you are, as long as you can do a good job. That's what we're interested in, and that's the way it should be right across the board, Sheila.
Yeah, our company is really a kaleidoscope of humanity. It really is. Just different races, religions, the works. But anyways, we should, speaking of COVID killing, things, it's also killing the family. But we have to sign off from YouTube before we get into that, and we made it 59 minutes, so that's really good, although I think we're about 20 minutes behind on the show according to the timeline we had laid out. So we're going to say see you in a minute, YouTube viewers, over on one of the other platforms, so Rumble, Odyssey, and Super U. Can you let us know when we're clear, though?
Back when I was a kid on CHCH, I used to watch